Greetings, comrades, friends on the African continent and throughout the globe. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Ngwenda, a young activist based in South Africa with Pan-Africanism today. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar that seeks to touch on a topic that is very relevant for progressive and revolutionary organizations on the continent and throughout the world, that being, what is a political alternative in the 21st century? More especially when we are celebrating Africa Liberation Day, such discussions become critical for organizations and activists throughout the continent. In society now, comrades, we see crisis in every direction. The contradictions of the current political and economic system are exposing the cosmetic nature of capitalism and its solutions to fundamental problems that humanity is facing. It is worse that the proponents of the current neoliberal economic system, especially after the fall of the Soviet Union, do not want to admit to the failure of the so-called Washington Consensus and free market policies that have marginalized and alienated the working class throughout the continent and the world. Africa is one of the youngest continents on the planet, with a median age of 19, and roughly 2/3 of the continent is under the age of 25. This is nearly 1 billion out of a population of 1.4 billion people. This young character of the continent will not change for the next century to come. It is projected to sit at 1.7 billion by 2050, mostly coming out of the sub-Saharan region. Despite this, comrades, over 400 million Africans still cannot access clean drinking water services. Over 640 million Africans cannot access energy. Over 770 million cannot access basic sanitation services. So given that most Africans are under the age of 25, this means that inequality and poverty disproportionately affect youth, which is the majority. In various sectors of society, comrades, life for young people is increasingly becoming challenging. Comrades, we have also explicitly seen a more aggressive militarization of neoliberal governments on the continent and a greater US military footprint through organizations such as AFRICOM, for an example, that has built enduring and non-enduring, in other words, permanent and semi-permanent military bases in more than 15 African countries, all in the name of clamping down on the continent's natural resources. Just to highlight this, comrade, Africa is one of the wealthiest continents on the planet, home to 65% of the world's arable land, 33% of the world's uranium, 50% of the world's gold, coltan, manganese, tantalite, and over 90% of the world's cobalt, platinum, and chromium. The continent also possesses a myriad of vast natural, historical, social, and cultural diversity. This includes abundant water resources such as the large rivers like the Congo, the Nile, Zambezi, and Lake Victoria. So, comrades, in 2023, the question of women, youth, and a political alternative stand front and center of political debates and discourse of revolutionary organizations on the continent. In light of the theme of Africa Liberation Day, we must discuss the question of a political alternative on the continent. Comrades, today, we have come to understand that women on the continent suffer from triple oppression, that being sex, race, and class discrimination, which is characteristic of patriarchy in the clutches of capitalism and imperialism. Working class women, who make up half of the continent's population, carry out 12.5 billion of unpaid care work every day, which is equivalent to 1.5 billion people working every day, working 8 hours with no remuneration. A large portion of Africa's population is urbanizing into the economic and industrial centers, where the sharpest contradictions of capital are being felt very aggressively. However, the rural areas continue to be stigmatized, comrades, and neglected. It is the responsibility of young leaders like ourselves to bridge that divide between urban and rural localities. So, comrades, in just opening this discussion, what then do we really mean when we talk about a political alternative? How then does Marxism as an ideology allow us an entry point into articulating what an alternative future could look like? Upon that background, comrades, I'd like to welcome you to this webinar And I'd also like to introduce our guest speakers, Hashem Mohmoud of the Popular Alliance Socialist Party of Egypt, and Joseph Musonda of the Socialist Party of Zambia. Welcome, comrades. Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. And I think this is the perfect moment for us to actually get into these critical discussions, comrade, and unpack what does this actually mean and how do we get into these questions in a proper class perspective. Comrades, welcome. Without wasting too much time, comrades, I will hand over to Comrade Joseph, who will be unpacking for us what do we mean when we talk about a political alternative in the 21st century. Comrade, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Comrade Mbadi and other comrades. As I've been introduced, I'm the chairperson for the student movement in Zambia and a member of the National Management Council Socialist Party in Zambia. And this question really on the political alternative to us is a question that is very important, and we must look at it in a holistic approach. Because when we talk about the political alternative as Socialist Party, the question must not only look at, when we look at Zambia's democracy, like any other country or any other space on the African continent, it deserves not only one, but multiple alternatives. But really, what is it that we really mean when we talk about political alternative as Socialist Party Zambia? Comrades, we must look at others who look at this perspective in a sense that to them, they look at political alternative with those with state power and as all means possible. However, our position is that political alternative must provide not just an alternative to the faces and symbols in government, but really to the structure of power that determines the course of our country and the continent at large. And this is in pursuit of human dignity, comrades. When we look at this aspect, we must look at the structure in Zambia where the state power has been monopolized in three parts. You know, there's one part which really focuses on the economic monopoly, where a few individuals are beneficiaries of the state's wealth or the country's wealth, or the economic aspect of it, the decisions of it are made by the few individuals. The other aspect is the monopoly of social power, which defines what is acceptable in society, what is permissible, and what is virtuous in our society. But this, comrade, has limited the legitimacy and prestige, mainly especially to a few individuals, where it has ruled out women, young people. It has marginalized a certain group of people, and the selected few are the ones who have a say on what must happen in society. The third one, comrades, is the monopoly of political power, which now controls the authority of the state to intimidate, purchase, and crush political opponents. And this has also limited the political voices to the chosen few. All these comrades are not isolated from each other. They are joined through shared vision, coordinated actions, and active support for each agenda. Now, when all this is done and said, what is it? This is what now a capitalist and imperialistic system in our country or in Africa has done to delegitimize, impoverish, marginalize, and exclude vast populace of the Zambian population. It is this that has kept bulldozing the constitutional institutions of every variety. You know, it's not only the media, academia, law enforcement that are under attack, but even political parties and their political opponents. Now, after all this is done and said, as a socialist party in Zambia, what future do we envision for a socialist state in Zambia? What are the things that we are looking at to be this is the alternative for the political for our political party? when we are defining the state structure or the political structure in Zambia, first of all, we must put in our mind that this should be a collective structure where participation, the power of the state is given to the people and the leaders are left to lead. So in terms of education, healthcare, what kind of education system are we looking at? How do we allow our people to participate? What kind of history are we teaching our people? Are they learning the correct things? Are they appreciating where they come from and where they are going? So our current education system is that has put our people to look at themselves to be inferior, to look at our colleagues that colonized us to be the superior ones. Our solutions, we have to look to them for us to achieve certain solutions. We're dependent on them in whatever that we do. But we are saying we must break down that barrier, we must break down that structure where our people must be equipped with information, with knowledge, starting at a tender age. Now, this is done at different levels, be at family level, religious levels, and even our education system, the formal education system that we have. When we start reforming our education system, we look at young people having access to education, regardless of the background they are coming from, quality education, where they can have free education. Healthcare, our people must be healthy. We give them free healthcare. But all these things cannot be done if our political system remains the way it is. We can change faces the way we want to change until we start breaking the institutions that legitimize the certain legislation in Zambia. You know, our parliament must make laws that protect the indigenous people of this country. We start creating a space where we start opening up trade with other countries, where we start having free trade with other countries. These borders that have been created, we must not be identified by where I am coming from. We are all Africans, we are blacks. When we start building this culture in our homes, in our schools, where I look at a Zimbabwean to be an African, to be my brother, to be my sister, it is easier to see that even an aspect of solidarity will be enforced at a larger scale, because the sufferings of the people in Egypt, the sufferings of people in Zimbabwe, the sufferings of people in Palestine, all these must be my sufferings. Until when we start creating systems that now start changing the perception, the mindset of people, the mindset of young people, our leaders themselves, then we are going to have an alternative that will be there to pursue human dignity. When we talk about human dignity, our people must have clean access to clean water and sanitation. They must have proper shelter. They must participate in the affairs of their country. I think our parliament, if in Zambia, our parliament, if in lack of a better term, I think we can call it the most sexist parliament. If you look at the participation of women in our parliament, very few women we have in parliament. If we go to young people, very few young people, but we have the older generation making decisions for young people. They are thinking about themselves, because when they are making this Agenda 2063, it's a 50-year plan that the people are making decisions on this agenda will not even be there after 10 years. It's high time we started having young people coming on board to make decisions that will safeguard their future. Now, when you look at the socialism ideology itself, the teachings of Karl Marx, when they start bringing in, we start talking about capitalism, the imperialism, the class struggle, these are not things that we must just preach on paper. In practice, the poverty division in Zambia, we have an average of over 57% poverty levels. In the capital city of Zambia, we have certain places in Zambia at 8% poverty levels, 78% poverty levels, and these are countries that are well resourced in terms of natural resources. But due to the monopoly that I was talking about in the beginning, where very few individuals have chosen themselves to benefit, we keep changing political parties to take over state power, but nothing changes because the system remains intact that protects the foreign interest until those barriers are broken down. When the people own their own country, they own the means of production, our people start participating fully without anyone enforcing what decision they should make, then we know that we have reached a state where human dignity is attained, because people are sleeping well, people are drinking water well, they can access electricity, they can access the fuel, they are not dependent on foreign aid, they are standing up for their colleagues in other spaces. then comrades, as a party, will be more than happy to say we have attained what we have been preaching as an alternative to the current dispensation in Zambia. Thank you, comrades.
Thank you so much, Comrade Joseph. I think my internet is slightly problematic, comrades. Please do bear with me. But I think you've mentioned such important points in terms of participation in decision-making, owning of the means of production, decolonizing the way that we view our history and how we view ourselves, such important elements of what an alternative could look like, comrades. But not to take too much time, then we would allow Comrade Mohmoud to then quickly shift us to the question of how does Marxism help us in building this political alternative? How does the ideology with the socialists in Egypt? So, comrade, without wasting any time ado, Comrade Mohmoud, the
Thank you, comrade. Greeting, comrades. So when we are talking about the class struggle in Egypt, like we can say that it appears like in some forms. First, that there is an economic form, which the proletariat struggle with the bourgeoisie through their labor organization in this form, and then in a political form, which we have our own parties or our own organizations, and third, with to adapt with the system itself. So as we know, like when you don't have your own money, your own decision, you cannot do anything. And when you are being controlled, when you don't have your own decision, it's getting hard for you to work, to act, to do anything. So let me first take you to the situation in Egypt, including the conditions of socialist organizations and the working class in general. Here we have more than 50,000 prisoners and imprisoned, most of whom are working class and prisoner of conscience. According to like the official numbers, in Egypt, the number of the unemployment people in the country reached 25 million, with an increase of 7.4% of the total labor force, which is like 1 million and 0.3. Okay, so also like you can also know that the unemployment rate among males in Egypt reached 5.2, and it's 19 among females, with the size of the labor force reached 25 million for males and only 4.9 million for females. The percentage of the unemployment in the age group 15 to 29 years reached 61, meaning that more than half of this age group do not find a job until they reach the age of 30. The matter, it doesn't stop, like it doesn't end there, but there are more than 8,000 of factories stopped according to official figures. In addition to dozens of factories, companies, and national facilities that the government has begun to close or sell recently to Gulf investors. At the same time, the workers themselves suffer from very difficult conditions. The lucky ones gets about $80 a month in exchange for more than 8 hours a day, which for them to look for additional work for more than 8 hours so that they can barely pay their gas, water, electricity, rent, and other expenses, which mean that they only return to their homes for a few hours just to get a little rest to continue walking within the same circle. Despite this, these workers are not free from dismissal and reduction of salaries without anyone defending their right, especially since they are prevented from even having their own independent union. Some are even arrested if they demonstrate or demand their right, and they are accused of committing terrorist crime. All these conditions and others led 5 workers of one company to commit suicide inside and outside their workplace as a result of their inability to fulfill their obligations after suspending the payment of their salaries for a month without any government intervention to protect them. And while the working class in Egypt is getting poorer day after day, we find that the government focusing on spending billions of pounds and building the largest capital, the largest mosque, the largest church, and the largest prison in the world, while using its media tools to argue the poor to rationalize their expense and eat chicken legs. So a few days ago, I was participating in an event for the African Journalists Union, which hosted former Minister of Petroleum, who was talking about the impact of gas on international and local conflicts. Then suddenly, without reason, came out with a very funny proposal, calling companies that to manufacture the dinnerware to reduce the size of pots to force citizens to reduce their size of food, to prevent what he described as a huge waste of resources. It's just only a part of what's happening for the working class in Egypt. So when we see all these conditions, we can briefly know what's really happening with the working class. And I think that what's happening in Egypt, it's also happening in all our countries, according to the same system that controls workers, that controls money, that controls everything. So for me, also, if you look how individualism we have become, it appears that many people are still under ideological control, but maybe we don't realize it, or we do. So capitalism always try to be the dominant system over the last year. However, it has no way resolved, but rather displace the fundamental problems and tension of our society. So for me, all those problems can be solved in several ways. First, to give the majority their own decision to act, to work, to own their things. So for me, when the majority have the ability to control the workplace, when like it happened that the society, it happens that society is changing gradually and it becomes more corrupted. However, it means that we have more to do and more to achieve. So for me, I think socialism is not something that we can be introduced easily. It requires great effort, great organizing, hard work, collective effort, and necessary responsibility on us. So in our workplaces, in our small local communities, and at every occasion and time. On the other hand, I guess we must realize that this path will not be easy, but rather it will be faced with many obstacles, which we must realize and prepare to bear their severe consequences if we have a sincere desire for change. Thank you, Comrade.
Thank you so much, Comrade Mohmoud. Apologies again for my poor internet connection, comrades, but I hope that I am audible and that you can at least hear me, comrades. Thank you so much for lifting the veil off of so many of our eyes, comrades. So many young Africans do not know the condition of the working class in Egypt, let alone North Africa, and the misery of capital and what capital has imposed on the working class, to the point where someone will take their own life, 5, as you have mentioned, take their own lives, because that they cannot stand the misery of what capital has imposed on the working class. Touches on the impact of what is going on to the working class in Egypt. Thank you so much, leadership, for enlightening us with this information. But I'm going to just ask in just 5 minutes, Comrade Joseph, and yourself, Comrade Hashem, starting with yourself, Comrade Joseph. I'm touching on the declining standard of living, comrade. How is this manifesting itself within the context of Zambia? How is this affecting the working class in Zambia, Comrade Joseph? If you could just touch on that for us, leadership.
Thank you, comrades. The declining standard of living in Zambia has not spared anyone, including the very few with state power, in a sense that 4 years ago, we started noticing a very terrible decline in the standard of living, because the cost of living was going up, commodities were going up, fuel was going up, everything was going up, yet the wages were stagnant. And we started, in the midst of COVID-19, we started seeing a lot of people losing their jobs, which even worsened the situation. We have seen a lot of people flooding the streets, in street vending, trying to make ends meet. And they would be running battles with local authorities, dispersing them from the streets. So the situation at the moment is quite bad, the highest it has ever been in Zambia, according to the estimations that have been, the statistics that have been given so far. For a family of 5, I think now they have to survive over 9,000 Zambian kwacha, I think, which is similar to 9,000 or 8,000 something rands. So this, you find that the average of the working class in terms of the wages, those that are getting wages, the average people are getting as low as 1,000 kwacha, 1,500. Even when having the minimum wage set by the Ministry of Labor, because of the desperation that people are in, are taking up jobs where they're being exploited. You know, we are having our young women being abused so that they can just make ends meet. And this now has also resulted in the new infections of HIV infections that we are seeing on the rise among young people. It has not spared even the very students. We have seen even in universities where hunger has actually struck and people are getting into these businesses just to make ends meet. And we are seeing universities recording quite high numbers in terms of STIs, among them HIV. So the standard of living, comrade, in Zambia is not even a question that one individual, one political party can answer, but we can offer alternatives to how we can alleviate what is going on currently. Because if we look at our agriculture sector, where it has, I think, quite a huge labor force, but yet it adds very minimal to our GDP in Zambia, if not less than 20%. I don't have the correct figures, but it's quite, in terms of percentage, it's quite very minimal, about 7% or so that it adds. This tells us that there's been a neglect in terms of investing in our agriculture to curb the poverty levels that we are seeing in Zambia, especially where the peasant farmers are concerned. We have seen multinational corporations that compete with peasant farmers in terms of agriculture, but until government takes a deliberate move to put investment into agriculture a priority, they start investing into climate-resistant crops, they start teaching our people new means of agriculture. And this is what the Socialist Party in Zambia is actually doing. It has embarked on a massive campaign in the agroecology programs, where it goes in various communities in rural areas to teach our people how they can grow crops without even depending on the fertilizer that these multinational corporations actually produce, which are damaging our land. How they are teaching our people new means of making detergents so that they can actually make ends meet. But this is limited because we're a political party that resources are not at our disposal. We have to scrounge here and there to make ends meet until those with state power take a deliberate decision to start investing in social programs. Comrades, they can set minimum wages, but I've never seen anywhere in the world where a country has managed to pay wages that have moved people out of poverty. But it's by creating an environment where the citizens can thrive. They can thrive either via entrepreneurship, agriculture, utilizing their mineral resources. We have precious minerals in Zambia. You know that Zambia is a major producer of copper. We are a strategic country when it comes to the production of emeralds. We have now even other minerals such as socialite that now some officials in government are being found in scandals. All these things, if government takes a deliberate position to utilize these resources to the benefit of Zambians, we may see the standard of living being curbed. The fuel prices are skyrocketing, they're not coming down, they keep going up. They are the worst in the history of this country. They've never been at the rate at which we are. Even with the previous administration, who left the prices of fuel somewhere at 17 kwacha, we are now buying fuel closer to 30 kwacha in Zambia. It's quite a challenge, and this has affected even the means of production. Some factories are laying off workers. Unemployment levels is very high. Not so long ago, we had over 8,000 people taking part in amplitude tests where the Zambia Revenue Authority only needed about 15 people to be employed for that position. And where you start seeing such numbers, over 8,000 people going to queue up to write tests to push for the 15 positions, there is a problem somewhere. We saw not so long ago where the Ministry of Health called for applications. We had over 200,000 people applying for 11,000 jobs. This tells you that something is wrong. We had 30,000 positions for teachers that they needed. but we had over 300,000 people applying for jobs. That tells you that something is wrong in a country. So the standard of living, comrade, has affected in each and everyone. Whatever people come across, they are trying to protect by all means necessary, because school fees are high. The government has introduced free education. They call it free education. But for you to meet the other requirements, you're as good as paying for the education that you're calling free. Tertiary education in Zambia is not free. Even those who are on government sponsorship, they are on loans, they have to pay back. Their monies are being deducted every month for those that were on government sponsorship at high interest rates, when the actually government promised them that you are going to abolish all those things. So I think this is not a question that the government is going to answer or the Socialist Party is going to answer, but it is a collective approach that every citizen must take interest in. But the interest will only come when people are politically aware, when people are involved in what is happening in their affairs. Some people don't really care. In Zambia, we have a situation where people are not politically conscious. They don't care what is going on. They just complain, but they don't want to take actions. It's now what we are seeing, people are becoming agitated. We have a president who opposed traveling international trips because that was not adding value. It was just taking away from the country's coffers. It was adding to poverty. He said he was not going to participate in that, but he has taken over 36 trips so far in the less than 2 years that he's been in office. We have seen government ministers having luxury vehicles, which the president has said they must be sold. To me, it doesn't make logic, because they gave it to the ministers. Now they are selling. I'm sure they are selling to their friends. It's just a way of siphoning money from the treasury. We have positions that have been created despite promising a lean cabinet. All these things, if we can utilize these funds, push them in social sectors where people can benefit, real investment made in agriculture, real investment made in other social programs, government taking ownership of their minerals. We just saw government giving up their 20% shareholding in their minerals and accepting a 3% royalty return, which is laughable. We saw our Zambia, the ZCCHI being suspended on the London Stock Exchange. All these things are raising questions in Zambia to say, what is going on? Fuel, which we promised was going to come down, keeps going up. The electricity tariffs are going up. Comrades, the situation in Zambia is worse than it has ever been. But you to take each and every one of us and those around us to start looking at other alternatives. We've heard of the BRICS, what is going on, the de-dollarization of the world economy. Zambia must start positioning itself to say, I think we must take a stance where we don't align with anyone, but the interests of our people must come first. It's only when we move our country out of poverty that we're going to start seeing success. So it has affected entirely everything, and the solution is not coming anytime soon, because all that we have, we're just changing faces to the system until, like I said in the beginning, we start reforming our laws, we start giving ownership of land to our people, to start farming, we start giving the ownership of this country must go to the very citizens of this country, the indigenous people of this country. Obviously, we are not going to be hostile to any other race. We have to accept them, they are our brothers and sisters, but they must not exploit us. It's only when we start changing these playing fields that we are going to start seeing a different level in terms of exploitation, poverty, and many other things. The marginalized must be looked after. Even when we look at the aspect of, it's becoming a hot debate, others sponsoring the issues of sexual orientation so that people can move out of poverty, others are getting into all that. But until we create a space where people can speak freely, people can participate regardless of their sexual orientation and whatsoever, people must come to the table and say, how do we handle our country's challenges? How do we take our country out of poverty? So this challenge is a challenge for us all. It's a challenge for you, Comrade Mbali. It's a challenge for the comrades from Egypt. It's a challenge for everyone to take part and say, how do we help one another? Because when Zambia is doing better, Egypt is doing better, Zimbabwe is doing better. We've seen how Zimbabwe has been resilient. We used to laugh at Zimbabwe to say they use a lot of money to buy bread, but that has come to us now in Zambia, which goes to the sayings to say they came for the Jews. I didn't speak up because I was not Jew. They came for the socialists. I didn't speak up because I was not socialist. Now they've come for me. There's no one to speak for me. So it has come now for us And the people that were looking at to say, oh, what you are doing is not correct, we are laughing at them. It is now happening in our own country. And the only way we are going to come out of this, let's take agriculture seriously. Let's own our minerals. Let's put all the ownership of this country to the people of this country. We have the Oppenheimers that are coming from South Africa. We have Craig Mills now is boasting that he's the special advisor to the president. All these people don't understand the challenges that people have in this country. Until we have people that understand the poverty levels, the standard of living in our country, appreciating the challenges and advising the president correctly so that they can start reforming the laws and the rules that will govern us so that now our people can have more power to do their business and environment is conducive for them to do different businesses, to do agriculture, to own their own land. Then we are going to start seeing probably the standard of living coming down. But it's not anytime soon because this is going to take time. So for the next 2 or 3 years, we have to brace ourselves because hard times are still coming. We've sold our decision making to the IMF. They're saying we haven't done certain things, so they can't give us another bailout, which they think that they opposed, but still going on. So this tells you that this dependence that we have as our Africans, Singapore, and many other countries in East Asia, were actually recipient of aid after the World War II. But 20 years later, they stopped being aid dependent. Now here we are as a country still dependent and discussing how do we get a different form of aid that is not so aggressive against us. All these things are conversations we must change and start saying, how do we sustain ourselves with the resources that we have? Then we are going to see poverty levels coming down, standard of living coming down. I thank you, comrade.
Thank you so much, Comrade Joseph, for that proper in-depth look as to how the challenge of the declining standard of living is affecting the working class in Zambia. You've touched on how the inflation of the country is strangling the working class, how the working class cannot even meet the amount that is called the bread basket. You cannot even meet that to provide food for your own households and families. The health of the youth, the health in universities, because Comrade Mohmoud, please take time to touch on what is it, the declining standard of living in Egypt. What affect the world? Please do touch a bit on facing that side and some of the things you might not know in terms of some of the elements of the media and other things that I know you're very much informed about. The floor is yours, Comrade.
Thank you, Comrade. So as we are talking about the difficulties or the struggle that people are facing, you can easily know that when you see someone in Egypt who is his biggest decision when he's in the market is like buying a cucumber or not. When you see some people who are having nothing but secondhand food from hotels because they couldn't afford buying new one for their families, as long as they are not even having money. When you see homeless, hundreds of homeless people in the Citadel street, over the streets of the Citadel, that means that what we are suffering because of like this dictatorship, which is also a part of capitalism, who's always pushing workers down, pushing everyone down, who's always taking the side of businessmen or the side of investors, like over the side of their own people. Like, like when we are talking about an alternative or how we can solve these problems, we also have to have a strategy. Karl Marx had a strategy we can use also to use in our current situation. So first of all, we have to work collectively inside workers. We have to gather, we have to show solidarity with everyone. We have to unite in all means. The second thing also is, as we are talking about media, it's a huge struggle here, because as you know, people get all informations from media. So when you know that our regime, like in Egypt, the regime is controlling almost all media, government media, and even forced independent media to sell them their newspapers or their website or their TV channels. So that means all information that everyone gets comes from the government. So, which means that also everything you are thinking about, or every information about workers who are struggling or who are protesting, will not show up. Everything about prisoners will not show up. So also the role of media is a very huge role to make. And I guess also this role we have to concentrate more on it by our organization, by showing like an international solidarity with our own local cases and international cases, to let others know. Because maybe in my country there are comrades in another country, they don't know it. They look at the infrastructure, buildings, and they see tourism, and they see how beautiful Egypt is. But actually it's not about building, it's about the people who are struggling, but you don't know how they are struggling. So to know that, as you don't own the media, it can be the responsibility of comrades, beside the local collective efforts here. I think that we also have to fight for our rights, not only talk about how oppressed we are. We are oppressed, but what we can do to face this thing, we have to act. We have to do something. We have to be organized more than now. We have to have strategy. We don't want to just to gain some rights. We want to gain all rights for all people, because there are more people suffering. So to give those people the rights, you have to have a plan, you have to have a strategy. And I guess we all could work on these things together. So thank you, comrade, and I appreciate being with you.
Thank you so much, leadership. Thank you so much, Comrade Mohmoud, for, again, just lifting the veil off of our eyes. Comrades, this is such an important discussion, especially on African liberation. And I'm hoping that whoever comes across it has learned that the working class struggle is never disconnected. And it is precisely the principle of internationalism that must be employed by the working class, because capitalism is an international and global phenomenon, which is affecting us in more similar ways than they are different. But just in closing, comrades, I want to just say that one cannot be a Marxist while denying scientific aspect of Marxism, while denying the centrality of class struggle. It is the use of science and the investigation of such phenomenon in society that must inform the class struggle. In other words, it is what must inform our praxis. It is the class struggle through a Marxist lens that will ultimately determine the road ahead and transform society and guide us through the flows and ebbs of the struggles that we are facing on this continent. Comrades, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much, comrades. keep safe, and hopefully we continue to do such work. We continue to have such conversations that will then inform us and remind us that we are all Africans, whether you are in the sub-Saharan region, whether you are in the Arab and Maghreb region. We are all working class, and we need to make sure that we remind ourselves and others that we are all of one blood. Thank you so much, comrade.